All right, welcome back to another Battleground or Breaking Ground webinar. Thanks for joining us. Before we get into Beef Loving Texan uh, webinar, I'm going to go over our grant and what we that funds us and allows us to do webinars like this before we continue. So, our grant is the expanding agriculture opportunities for veteran farmers and ranchers, and a couple of the goals for this program are to enhance coordination of the outreach, technical assistance, education, and training efforts for USDA agriculture programs, and assist the Secretary of Agriculture in reaching military veteran farmers and ranchers and improve their participation in USDA programs. A couple of program activities are to expand the current Battleground and Breaking Ground online curriculum by adding enhanced agriculture business and agriculture production training courses, develop hands-on learning events that include training in funding and technical resources, farm business management, financial planning, agriculture production, including climate smart practices and local and regional food systems, as well as raise awareness of outreach and technical assistance services available for military and veteran farmers and ranchers. So, currently on our webinar series, we just had the Texas Veteran Commission and webinar in January. Currently doing the Beef Loving Texas webinar. Upcoming at the end of March, we have USDA Rural Development. In April, we have AgSpire. Then we have Texas Agriculture Cooperative Council coming on in June 11th, and Capital Farm Credit June 18th. So stay tuned for those. Hands-on learning events. So our goal is to give participants the opportunity to see live demonstrations and practice skills learned in the online courses. So students will participate in the online course, and then during the hands-on learning, gain real-world knowledge, experience, and skill to enhance their ability to successfully manage their ag operation. Military and veterans will be eligible for a $362 stipend that they can get twice a year. The first 10 applicants that are military or veterans will, I guess, get the stipend. And then if you don't, if we have more than 10, then our cutoff is 10. So upcoming in-person events, we have the Sheep Hands-On Learning coming up April 2021, and which will be at the Texas A&M Sheep and Goat Center and the Beef Center. And then upcoming, we have the Beef Cattle 101 course or workshop, and those dates and locations are to be determined. So stay tuned for that. To look out for those things, you can go to our website under the events tab. Go to and subscribe to our newsletter, which pushes out all current events and different resources. And follow us on Facebook. All of our events, all of our webinars, we post on there before they happen, and along with registration links and whatnot. You can look at our events calendar on our website, or email us through our Texas Agribility email. Our survey link, please take the time to fill out this survey. It helps us to continue to get funded by grants because they value the input and want to know how what we're doing impacts you. So if you complete the survey at the end of the webinar, before we go into questions and answers, we'll throw the survey link in the chat box, and you click on it. Take 2 to 3 minutes, fill it out, and then you'll be eligible to be put into a drawing to win a chance to go to our boot camp for free. So with that being said, I'm going to push it over to Caleb, and we'll get started with Beef Loving Texans webinar.
When you click record, it'll ask you where you want to record it.
Yep, there we go. Now it's going. All right, Caleb, floor is yours. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank all of y'all for having me here today. My name's Caleb McLaurin. I work over at the Texas Beef Council. But before I get started today, I actually wanted to start out by saying thank you. I know that we've got a lot of either current or former servicemen, servicewomen, or if you were in the Marines, you're always a Marine, I recognize. But thank you that have served, and for the families of those that have served. It's because of your service and sacrifice we have the freedom and the safety to be able to raise livestock here in this country. And so our food supply chain and our ability to feed ourselves, feed our neighbors, and feed fellow Americans and those all around the world a good, nutritious, high quality, nutrient dense product like beef is because of men and women like you who responded to the call to serve. And so for that, thank you all very much. A little bit of background on who it is that I work for. Well, I work for cattle producers. Namely, I work for the Texas Beef Council, and we operate. Oh, geez, let's see. Are y'all still seeing my screen here? Here we go. BJ, are y'all still seeing my screen?
Yep, we can still see it.
Okay, we're having some control malfunctions, but I work for the Texas Beef Council. We operate the brand Beef Loving Texans. And so that's how we appear to consumers in the marketplace. A little bit about the Beef Council. The Beef Council is made up of, well, it was put together to help collect the beef checkoff. And so a little bit about what the beef checkoff is, if you aren't familiar. If you sell cattle in the state of Texas, there is a $2 per head assessment that is collected. And so anytime that cattle are sold, they're supposed to be $2 collected and sent to the Texas Beef Council. If you sell calves, for instance, through a livestock market, the livestock market, whenever they hand you your receipt along with your check, it's going to show that they deducted things like a yardage, a brand inspection. They're going to deduct a commission fee, which is their part of selling your animal. But there's also going to be a piece on there that's going to show is $2 per head for the beef checkoff. And that is something that cattle producers elected to have that assessment placed on themselves. And you're going to be like, what in the world? And we'll explain why that is here in just a moment. But at the Beef Council, we have a board of producers that are from all different areas of the beef supply chain. And I've actually have our current board pulled up here. You see it's men and women from across the state that are in different types of beef production. I mean, you've got folks like I'm going to go Brandon Coutre here. They have a purebred operation, so they're raising registered stuff for breeding. But right next to them, you have a lady named Klazina DeBoer. She lives in Dublin and has a dairy. Because guess what? Whenever you're milking animals, once those cattle have been milked out, or a lot of their offspring that they have, they're all going to ultimately end up in the part as part of the beef supply chain. And so the beef checkoff is collected even on those dairy animals whenever they are sold or harvested for the resale of beef. You've got, like I said, people who are in the Amy Kirkland here. She's actually a librarian in a public school system, but her family owns and operates a feed yard and they live on the property of that feed yard. And so that's another great example of men and women from all different walks of life in different parts of the beef supply chain. They're all cattle producers. They have to own cattle in the state of Texas. And because they own cattle, whenever those cattle sell, that checkoff is collected and sent in. And so the industry nominates them to serve on the Beef Council, and that's who our current board consists of. Now you say, Caleb, so you mean to tell me that the Beef Council is collecting $2 every time an animal is sold or harvested? Yes. Well, what in the world do y'all use that money for? Well, that board I just showed you, they're the producers that are responsible for dictating how every single penny of that is spent. It can only be spent on three things, and that's beef research, beef education, and beef promotion. When I say beef research, it's research into quality and different cuts, different way you can cut beef products to have a better eating experience, but it's also about nutrition. And frankly, a lot of the research that's been funded by cattle producers have been on human nutrition and how beef plays a role at the center of the plate as part of a well-balanced, heart-healthy diet. Education a lot of times is how do we take the results of all this research that cattle producers have funded and use that to educate different audiences. And then promotion, as the name may insinuate, it's just promoting beef. These three things are all built around building demand for the product that cattle producers ultimately raise. And to give a little bit of an example of, okay, why these three things, why in the world did cattle producers want this assessment to be placed on ourselves? I think you have to go back to this chart right here. This is the annual U.S. Retail Beef Demand Index. It's our way of measuring what is a demand for the product that we all raise. They index this information for the year 1980. And so what does that mean? Simply put, they said they measured what beef demand was at that time, and they say, hey, we're going to consider this 100%. Like this is optimal beef demand, just so we have a point of reference. Is beef going up or is it going down? And what do you see from this green line? Well, you see that from 80, 81, 82, 83, all the way into the late 90s, beef was in a downward spiral. So what does that mean? Well, when you think about demand, supply and demand and its function and how it can determine price, we had a case where from 1980 to 1994, we lost 16 million head in terms of our cattle inventory. And so that's this. You can see my mouse here. This that's not going to work. But this number here from 1980 to 1984. So that means total animals was reduced by 16 million head. That was a decline of 5 million beef cows. What do I mean by beef cows? These are females that have the capacity to have calves every year. And so that's 5 million fewer calves that are born year over year because we have 5 million fewer beef cows. And so obviously the supply of beef went down. Well, if you have constant demand and your supply goes down, what do you expect? You expect the price of beef to go up. However, that did not occur. And that is what worried cattle producers. That's why they went to Congress in the early 1980s and said, hey, we need some way to have an assessment that is producer founded, is producer organized, that producers are control of. We don't want the government touching any of it. We want to be complete control. We just want to assess this on ourselves so that we can fund some important things, because we think we need to have research about our product to understand why we have an erosion of demand, figure out what do we need to do to fix it. We need to educate people about the qualities of beef, and we need to promote our product. This graph shows why all those things were true. And so when you look that this eroding demand, even though we had less supply and you would have expected price to go up, it didn't go up. Instead, what happened is during that same time period, people ate less beef. They went from eating about 78 pounds of beef per year per person to 66 pounds of beef per year per person. And like people are running away from our product. We absolutely have to figure out why. Now, what we discovered is there's multiple reasons. One, I was born in 1990, and so I'm a product of the early 90s, and we didn't eat a lot of beef in our home. While we live in rural East Texas and had cattle, and I mean, we were, pro beef industry, I guess you would say, but I mean, we ate a lot of ground beef, but beef was tough during that period of time. And we actually funded a lot of research that proved that out. That beef was, in the eyes of consumers, considered unacceptably tough. You would go to a restaurant and order beef, and it was like eating boot leather more times than not. So we knew that, that's problematic. But at the same time, we had the medical community who was saying, hey, beef is bad for you. Beef, said the World Health Organization said that beef might be a carcinogen, that it can cause cancer. You had people saying, the medical community saying that beef causes high cholesterol. It's bad for heart health. Could help lead to heart disease. And so you go into a medical office and they say, hey, look, man, we see that you like to, dip tobacco, and you like to drink whiskey, and you like to stay up late, and you like to eat beef, and you need to cut all those out if you want to get healthier. Well, what we found out is people are like, well, beef at that time was kind of the easiest one to cut because, I mean, it wasn't the greatest eating experience. And so there's all these compounding things that are causing people to kind of run away from beef at that time. And I wanted to kind of point you all to the dietary guidelines. If you look at this chart from 1956, you see this red section. It says meat group, where they're recommending 2 or more servings of fish or some other meat product. And that was like, hey, the recommendation for Americans, this is what you need to do to have a healthy lifestyle, versus 4 servings of vegetables and fruits, 4 servings of bread and cereal, and then everybody needs a little bit of milk and cheese as part of their diet. You fast forward to 1980, and again, the 80s, 90s, you're going to see a common theme here. When the nutritional guidelines came out in 1980, look at number 3. It says avoid too much fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Does it say beef is bad for you? No. But at the time, beef was defined as being high in fat and high in saturated fat and causes a lot of high cholesterol. This was frankly an attack against the beef industry. That's why the medical offices were recommending that if people had heart issues or any other kind of medical issues, a lot of times they would recommend limiting beef as part of their diet. Obviously, that's not good for the beef industry. So a lot of the research, as I mentioned before, that cattle producers funded in the early days was, is this true? Like, we don't believe it's true, but if we're going to go, I mean, a bunch of country cattle folk going up against the medical community, if our accents don't discredit us, our vested interest in the well-being of the beef industry does, like we have to have good, scientific, sound, peer-reviewed research. And so tons and tons and tons of money was poured into research. And guess what? The research found out. It found out that, there's some lean cuts out there that doesn't cause high cholesterol, that it doesn't lead to heart disease. As a matter of fact, the American Heart Association today recommends 38 or more cuts of lean beef as part of a heart healthy diet. That's 180 degrees different than where we began, where they said it causes heart disease. Now the American Heart Association endorses 30 some odd different cuts of beef as part of a heart healthy diet. People aren't worried about eating beef causing cancer the same as cigarettes anymore. Those are all things that were able to be flushed out over time. And so you fast forward to the year 2020. For the very first time, the dietary guidelines talked about the importance of including red meats, including beef, in the diets of children under 2 years of age. Again, just like with American Heart Association, 180-degree worth of difference. It went from run away from beef, beef is bad, to now it's like, hey, you got a baby, you should be feeding them beef. Matter of fact, I have 2 little girls, and I remember one of them, I was at their 9-month checkup, and when we went in there, the pediatrician said, hey, just so you know, kids at this age, they struggle with iron deficiency. And so you need to be making sure that you're introducing beef and other red meats into their diets to help mitigate against that. Completely different discussion with our medical provider than you would have had a couple of decades prior. That is thanks to cattle producers investing in the product that they raise to make sure that we still have resilient demand by consumers who see the importance of having beef as part of a well-balanced diet. And I know a lot of you've probably seen the new dietary guidelines for this year. When they were released, it was a lot of big hoopla around it and a lot of discussion around it. And I would like to draw your attention, if you can see my mouse here. That's a steak. That's a ribeye at the top of the food pyramid. They literally turned this thing on its head. And now they talk about how important it is to have a lot of protein, dairy, and healthy fats. Those are things that you can find in beef. And not only is beef pictured at the highest point as something that you need to include in your diet, but it's actually pictured twice. This is ground beef right next to this ribeye steak. And so I again just talks about when you look at the 1980 nutritional guidelines in comparison to what we have now in 2026, it's come wildly and completely different. And so that again is no small part due to the research that cattle producers have been funding for the last several decades. So what do we do with this research? This is where education comes in. One example, there are several, but one example of what that education looks like is now that we have all this nutritional research, we have to get that in the hands of medical professionals. And so the beef checkoff dollars goes to fund a team of medical office outreach personnel. They're former pharmaceutical reps that now go to all of the big metropolitan areas within the state. We have them in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, going to medical offices of all kinds, a lot of family practices. And they had the total number, I mean, it was like 800 and something, I believe, last year, new medical offices. They had 7,900 different touch points with these medical providers, trying to just show, hey, we're not trying to sell anything. We don't have a product to sell. We're just sharing a lot of the research that's already been funded. It's scientific, peer reviewed, published in good journals, well-respected journals. It's endorsed by a medical community. We just want to make sure that they have their eyes on it. And when you look at those 5,900 different touch points with those medical professionals, 93% of those medical providers said that they have they're more likely to share recommendations for their patients that are more favorable to beef. No longer making recommendations to cut beef out of the diet, but to have more favorable recommendations. I have to admit, my family struggles with high blood pressure. I went to the doctor the other day for a checkup and she was talking about it and she goes, "Hey, I see that you're part of the beef industry. Just so you know, you can still make healthy choices, that there's all these different cuts of beef, that actually help contribute to heart health." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am, I'm quite aware." But again, wildly different conversation than people's had in the past with their medical providers, and something that the cattle industry, cattle producers across the state of Texas continue to invest in over time. Another example of ways that cattle producers are educating consumers is that through things like the sports nutrition game plan. This is something that Beef Checkoff Dollars developed. It is a meal planning system for people who have high school students, and there's some colleges that utilize this, but they have athletes. And so they'll go and use this program to try to develop a meal plan for their student athletes. We've had over 10,000 coaches and athletic directors, trainers, who've signed up their students and their programs for the sports nutrition game plan. I know when I was coming up, it was like, oh, you have a cross country meet, you need to go eat a bunch of pasta to fuel up. And it's like, well, protein is still critically important too. And so this just provides some good scientific research. A new world-renowned nutritionist helped us pull all this information together. And you can go in there and meal plan and prep and be fueled for success on the field, on the court, in the pool, on the track, or wherever those athletes may be. So we've talked about research. We've talked about a couple of examples of what education looks like. Well, now let's talk about, how do we promote product? How do we get more people to consume beef? Because if we're all cattle producers, we need people to be consuming beef. If you look here, we have a couple of metrics. This is over the past year, and so this is from our annual report, and this is what Beef Checkoff Dollars funded in fiscal year 2025. There was over 165 million times that we were able to reach consumers with beef advertising. We have almost 230,000 social media followers. We had 1.6 million recipe views on our website, which I'll kind of demo here in just a little bit, and over 12.3 million video views of different content that we produce. We have a pit master and grill master, Jerry McPherson, in our office, and they're constantly having camera crews come in and film him on developing or putting together different recipes and different tricks of the trade, and We also have another great meat scientist on staff, Kaylee Griner. She's been in a lot of those videos helping people cut different cuts of beef and utilize different cuts of beef. And so a lot of good education and helping people find success with beef in that way. Another cool thing that started, it really got off the ground last year is a thing that we call Smoke Lab. This is a hands-on, in-person educational event where people will come in for a day and they'll learn about smoking beef. So that's brisket, sirloins, you name it. And again, Jerry McPherson is the one who kind of puts this on and teaches these classes. We've had, frankly, other pit masters from really well-known barbecue establishments come in. We have folks from the Food Channel who's come in, social media influencers, but then just people out on the road, and a bunch of them who are like, "Hey, I want to be able to cook more beef, but I have to know how to do it in order to have that success." And so when you think about yourselves, or if you have any friends, or if you're trying to market beef direct to consumers or something like that, this is something that is available for you and any potential customers that you may have to just try to have more success in smoking beef. I know I've got some people that have become friends of mine. They have a direct beef sales business where they rent counter space or shelf space from a couple of different stores around the Mason area. And what they were doing is trying to come in and do cooking demos in town on the weekends and try to say, oh, look, we're going to develop this recipe and we're going to cook it with you and you're going to get to taste it. And then we're going to sell this meal kit that includes their beef that they're selling. And so they wanted to be able to make sure that, hey, they knew how to cook that beef and they knew how to cook it well. And so we were able to get them into one of these classes and they learned a whole lot from it. And they spoke really highly of their takeaways from that. And they're able to take that back to their community to help market the beef that they are literally raising. It's crazy. This started and we can only handle about 25 people at a time. But we have over 2,000 people that are on the wait list. And so this is the part of the presentation where I don't want to screw these videos up.
We just got off the fire station.
These are going to be a couple of social media influencers, and I'll just show you some quick clips of them talking about their experience with Smoke Lab.
We're headed down to Austin, Texas now for the ultimate Beef Loving Texans Smoke Lab. It's put on by Jerry McPherson. I'm super pumped about it. Let's go see what it's about.
So this is Jerry right here in the blue shirt, help doing this deal. I think there's another video here I'm going to go ahead and show y'all of another social media influencer that kind of spends a little more time explaining her experience here.
Leave the grilling and smoking to the boys? Not anymore. They say barbecue is religion in Texas, and I'm ashamed to admit that your girl has absolutely no confidence when it comes to grilling or smoking meat. Luckily for us Austin folk, there's an extremely interactive and hands-on class that teaches you all about smoking the #1 meat in Texas, beef. And it's taught by legendary pitmaster Jerry McPherson. This is Smoke Lab, and honestly, I had way more fun than I expected to in a class where it's all about beef, smoke, and fire. I got a deep dive into the history of barbecue and beef smoking in Texas, learned what the different grades of beef are, how to choose your cut, and so much more. I even got some tips from more seasoned pitmasters who joined the class. My favorite part though, getting to eat so much barbecue. And of course, the hands-on experience. Can you believe that this was my first time lighting my own grill to prep it to smoke some top sirloin? And I got the honors of slicing our cut of meat to share with the class. If you've been wanting to gain more confidence smoking meats or already know what you're doing behind the grill and want to learn more, make sure you check out their page, Beef Loving Texans, for when the next class drops.
So here are a couple of statistics from this course. I don't know how you have 189% increase in smoking confidence, but that was based off of a survey that was done pre and post. Obviously, a really great response, and people learned a lot in this course. Right now, I think this is the most recent number. We have 2,800 people or more on the wait list to get into this class. And so there's a huge demand for it, and we're trying to ramp up how many people we can have come through the class at a time and how frequently those classes occur. Those are held at our office where I work. And so all of those videos are from our office. But yeah, you can see we've only been able to accommodate 150 attendees so far, but really trying to ramp that up because again, it's all about teaching people how to find success with your product. As a cattle producer, if you spend months and months and months raising it and feeding it and doing all these things, and maybe that goes further down the supply chain and ends up in the feed yard, and there's all these different people who have their hands on these animals, caring for these animals, and raising a really high quality product. We don't want people to screw it up at the very last few minutes, right before they consume it and have an eating experience that isn't ideal. We want them to have really good success with beef so they come back and choose it again and again. And this is just one example of many of the programs that we have at the Beef Council trying to promote that. And so we're fixing to transition to another part of this speech. But before we do, I just want to revisit this demand graph. This is the same graph that we showed you earlier. It's just extended out and through the projections for 25 and 26. And what do you notice about that green line? Yes, it was a downward trajectory, but because of the cattle producers' foresight and the need that they identified and their investment in that, now we no longer have a downward trajectory of demand. We have demand that looks more healthy. There's ebbs, there's flows, but it's upward in nature. And let's be honest, beef is expensive right now, really expensive. People are still choosing it. Economists would say that by now, we would expect people to start choosing other protein sources that are cheaper, that beef just prices people out of the market. And we are seeing an increase in ground beef, which is expected whenever things are really, really high. Ground beef's a little more affordable. However, we're also seeing growth in our prime cuts as well. So it's crazy that when you look at the spectrum, the highest price beef as well as the most economical beef, the demand for both are going up. That talks about how resilient demand is. Right now, you can accommodate or you could say that about $250 per head on the value of those animals can be contributed to all the demand growth that we've seen. There's a lot of different factors that affect price, but all of those factors fall apart if you don't have demand. It is rudimentary in our ability to have a sustainable cattle supply chain. And so for that, I thank all the cattle producers that back in the early 80s had the foresight to create the beef checkoff program. They knew we needed people to choose beef. And now we're in an era where beef is king and it's talked about and it's sought after. And it's an important part of everyone's diets. Real quick, before we're going to go do a test drive of our website, I just wanted to show you this is kind of all the money that got brought in over this past year and where those dollars were spent. As you can see, a lot in nutrition and health, a lot in consumer marketing. Again, just trying to build demand for the product that cattle producers raise. And so what I'd like to do next is point your attention to two different websites. One, we have TexasBeefCheckoff.com. This is kind of the producer-facing website. So if you have questions about some of the programs that producer dollars have been funded or like what's been going on, you can sit here and go through countless different stories and examples of all the different programs and things that beef checkoff dollars are being used for. You can also click here if you wanted to go pay the checkoff. If you had a transaction, there's all kinds of different stuff going on here, but I especially want to point your attention to our Beef Loving Texans website. It's beeflovingtexans.com, because when you think about resources that some of you might find helpful, useful, especially as you start to get like a beef operation or cattle operation up off the ground, this is something that I'm hopeful will be very helpful for you. And so as you can see here, this is kind of the main entry page, and you're going to see a lot of food imagery, food. You can browse recipes by type. You can look at appetizers, breakfast, burgers, high protein meals, the family dinner, kid friendly, the kind of those short prep time deals that your kids will eat. That's one that I look at quite a bit. Mexican food, pot roast, quick and easy, It just goes on and on and on by category. And there's just, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of recipes that are here. A couple of things I wanted to point out. Yes, there's recipes, and you can just start, let's go pick like appetizers, let's say. Just click on appetizers. If you're looking for an appetizer that uses beef, corned beef and pickle dip, takes 5 minutes to prepare. It'll go whatever, you say you want to do some beef spring rolls with carrots and cilantro. Click on it. Let's see if my internet works. So as this opens up, you're going to see what it's supposed to look like. And then you're going to see it's going to take about 30 minutes. The ingredients that are listed here, it serves about 4 people. You can click to print the recipe if you'd like to print it out, or you can click this switch. It says cook mode. So if you're on your phone, it leaves your phone screen open so you can look at it. If you got dirty fingers and dirty hands, keep that going. It has the list of all the ingredients you need. You can check those off, the ones you have, the ones you need. And then it walks you through the steps of preparing them. It also gives you nutritional information and things like that. And so that is something that 1.6 million recipe views, this is what we were talking about. This is where that's coming from. So I urge you, if you're looking for something new to try one night of the week, or if you've got customers that are saying, what in the world how are we supposed to use all this beef if you're selling halves, wholes, or quarters? This is a great resource for them. You also have, actually, I'm going to jump and look at over here. There's this cooking piece. There's a couple of different deals. So if you go under cooking, and let's look at cooking methods, it can go through different types of cooking methods. And so it's say, hey, I'm interested in stir frying, and I've got some beef. I want some recipes specifically about stir frying. It's going to give you a little bit of background about stir frying, what it is, the important components of it, step-by-step instructions. But then it's also going to give you some stir fry type recipes. And so there's a Thai curry beef, mango tango tacos, beef ramen noodle bowl, beef pasta Asian, and you can view more, and it'll just go on and on and on and on of all these different recipes that uses that different type of cooking method. But I also wanted to go and show you, if you go to cuts, this is something that my father-in-law, he gives us like a quarter of beef about twice a year. He'll have a kef done and kind of divide it up amongst the family. And so he's like, okay, the problem that a lot of people selling beef direct have, the problem that we have because we're getting beef that way is, okay, I know how to cook all my ribeyes. I cooked them. I know what to do with a brisket. If I've got time, I can cook a brisket. But I've got short ribs and all these other different cuts that I don't know what to do with. You can literally go on there and click on all these different primal cuts and select, hey, I happen to have a top sirloin steak. I'm going to click on it. It's going to tell you about that cut. Like, hey, this is great value. It makes good kebab, stew meat, or cube steak. Here's some different recipes. Sirloin sandwiches with red onion marmalade. Maybe that's a great recipe that you can use for that cut. And then you can go on there and it, again, goes through all the ingredients, goes through all the things. That's something that a lot of people have found a whole lot of value in. While you're on this site, you can also look at Beef TV. The Beef Checkoff has funded a couple of different television shows that streamed. I know one of them streamed on Hulu and YouTube television for a long time. But you can go in there and look at different beef episodes. So if you go to like BarbeQuest is the name of it. If you go to BarbeQuest, this is something that was streaming on Hulu. You can go watch season 3. What's cool about this is they talk about producers. They talk about their operations and their role in the beef supply chain. They also talk about retailers and restaurants and so on, and then share some really cool behind the scenes about those restaurants that are scattered all throughout the state. We can watch a quick trailer real quick here.
I wanted to stay true to like where barbecue came from.
This is classic Texas barbecue. We're not going to change.
I'm trying to make great food that I love. I try to make sure that there are no compromises in the quality of it.
This is so different than anything I've seen barbecue-wise, but I'm not mad about it. No! You can come in here and really have your mind blown.
Being in the kitchen growing up, running around with our grandma or grandpa cooking, all these flavors right here were a little part of that. So we just really took that and ran with it.
So this is just an example of some of the things that the Beef Checkoff has funded if you care to go and look at this. And the last thing I want to show you is, again, if this is going to be really applicable if you're trying to teach people how to cook beef, if you're trying to sell beef direct, if anywhere on this Beef Loving Texans website, and I'll drive it in this way so you can kind of see, no matter where you are on the website, if you scroll all the way down, there's going to be down here the part that says About Us. There's a part that says Resources. If you click on Resources, it's going to send you to this page that is literal pages. This all loads. It's pages and pages and pages of worth of materials that were developed for people to use. So, for instance, there's a couple of different things you can do. If you're selling beef direct, you can go up here to where it says Category and select Toolkits. They have a direct beef sales toolkit, and this is curated items that people who sell beef direct have found to be helpful. And so you can click on that, and when you do, it shows, hey, these are some, it's kind of a curated list of here's some things that people have found helpful. Some of these are stuff that if it has this little arrow, you can literally download right to your device and look at it. Like here's your Texas favorite recipes. You can click this, it'll open up a PDF, and it goes through a whole bunch of different recipes. However, you can also go and just click Add to Order, and this is something that'll add to your shopping cart, and you can place an order of it. It'll be shipped directly to you, and there's no additional charge, not even for postage, for any of these items. These are things that have been paid for by producers already. The hope and intent is that we can get these back into the hands of the producers who funded the development of these products, and that they can use that in their operation to help get through beef. I know this is one that a lot of people, I hand this out a lot, but it's the freezer beef brochure, and so it'll go through like, hey, if I'm buying a whole animal, yeah, there's, what's the yield grade? Like if I have 1,000-pound animal, how many pounds of beef do I expect to get back? How big of a freezer do I need in order to hold all of that beef? And it goes through a whole bunch of different things like that people find really helpful. But I want to encourage you, these are things that have been kind of a curated list that we notice people have ordered a lot that are selling beef direct, but you are not limited just to these items. If you go back, you can scroll through. Let's go back to all of them. You can scroll through everything on all these deals. So for instance, if you know somebody who, let's say that, I think this is, who's struggling with weight management, but only speaks and reads in Spanish. Well, look, we have a Spanish guide to weight management, and it'll sit there and give tips and tricks and help educate people of some good decisions they can make to help manage their weight, but still include beef as part of their diet. And so again, there's just gobs and gobs of research-based information here. I know I had a friend of mine, he's like, hey man, my wife's been killing me. She's making me eat chicken all the time. She struggles with high cholesterol. Is there anything you can do to help? I downloaded this brochure and some other information off our page and sent it to them. And then within a couple of weeks, like, hey man, steak's back on the menu. I was like, that's awesome. That you're able to incorporate that back into your family's regular meal routine. And so one thing I know that a lot of y'all are looking for are different programs. This is, again, it's private. Cattle producers created it, and cattle producers control it. And so it's not done through any kind of government grant or any kind of program like that. But we did want to make sure that y'all knew these type of resources are available for your use. And so with that, I'm going to stop share, and I can turn it back over to you, BJ, or open it up for any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was awesome information. Before we open it up to questions, Heidi, do you mind dropping in that survey link into the chat? And then, guys, the survey takes literally 2 to 3 minutes long. So we'll open it up to questions as you guys fill out that survey. And then at the end of questions, we'll check who's filled out the survey, and Heidi will run a little simulated like hat drawer, and they'll draw a name out of the hat for who wins the free boot camp course. So there we go. Heidi just put that in the chat. So we'll open it up to questions from here. You can throw them in the chat or just ask them yourself for those of you that are on.
And as everyone's typing, I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I've been at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo for the last couple of days, and it was a pretty day today. So, and I got home late last night, so decided for work from home. And I'm sitting outside, and I didn't know that everybody and their brother's going to decide to start weed eating, and the wind was going to pick up. And so, sorry for any noise and interference, but hopefully, a bunch of agriculturalists as yourselves, y'all can appreciate the fact that I didn't want to be cooped up in an office today. But I do apologize for all the background noise.
I haven't heard any, so.
How often I see Susan or Suzanne ask how often do the recipes change? When you look at some of the printed materials, I know I take those with me to a lot of different events, and so if any of y'all go to, clinics or something held by Texas A&M AgriLife, like a cow-calf clinic or something like that, a lot of times we'll be there at those, and we'll have those available for people to take for free, or I should say at no additional cost because cattle producers already pay for it. We will do kind of a redesign of those ever so often, and that includes incorporating new recipes in those cards. And so those do change, for any one of those collections of recipe cards, they may change, every year or two. But when you look at if you're utilizing our online platform, they literally add recipes all the time. The reason that I struggle with my weight is because I work at the Beef Council and it's all open air. And like you saw from the videos, there's people in there cooking all the time. A lot of the times they're in there developing recipes, doing photo shoots, getting all the content recorded. And so I think, let me see if I can pull it up on the website real quick, and I might can share my screen again. Let's do this. So let's look here. Somewhere they have a section called new. And it might be under the recipe section. So if you just go click recipes, they have popular, new. So these are recipes that have probably been uploaded within the last month or so. I know because they were cooking a bunch of these in the office like 4 or 5 weeks ago. And so that's when they were able to capture all the photography, get them all uploaded online. And so if you go see more, these are the newest recipes that have been uploaded. And so they're constantly being curated, added to. I guess the one reason we saw Thai curry beef and mango tango taco so much earlier during the webinar is because those are newer recipes that they just added to the list. A French onion open face burger. And so yeah, they are constantly being updated online. If I see you in person somewhere, those recipe cards and recipe books about every year. So
is there any like current research that you guys are doing?
So this gets real complicated. On the national level, a lot of the research we do, we'll try to partner with other state checkoffs, and then the national check off all the monies we kind of put together and say, hey, look, the beef industry, cattle producers have decided that these are some important areas to research for this year. And so the way that works is we'll go in, they'll say, hey, we're looking for and it's kind of like a grant program in that, like, hey, we have money available to fund this type of research, and then we have all these folks out there that'll make proposals and say, hey, we can do research like this. This is kind of our what we would be doing. These are what the results would kind of look like. This is kind of what it would take to do this type of research project. And then we have a committee full of cattle producers from all across the United States who get in a room and hear all the different proposals from all the different researchers and then award those dollars to them. And so they'll go and conduct the research, and then we reimburse them for their costs so we can get that research back. And so I forget what the current one is. I know last year they were doing some around like sustainability, namely around how do we define that word and make sure that word is not something that gets away from us. And so, what are some of the practices that we have that would be considered sustainable, and developing language around those, and different practices around those and that type of stuff. And so I'd have to go back and refresh my memory on what the current call to action is on research projects. But yes, there is a lot of money poured into research each and every year. Research is one of those things that it's a never-ending charge. I think the greatest example of that is back in the early 1990s. They awarded a huge research project called the Muscle Profiling Project. And what they did is they went in and they looked at the carcass and they looked at all these different individual muscles to try to figure out different ways to cut them to make different cuts. That's where the flat iron steak came from. We didn't have a flat iron steak until they had this research project and they say, hey, look, there's this really, really tender cut and it's part of a roast right now. And so now we can go and trim it and cut it this different way and get another steak product out of it that's wildly popular today. That was developed because of that research project. But here's the thing, that was done in the 90s. How is it applicable today? There's fewer cattle. We're feeding those cattle longer out of necessity. Those cattle are growing a whole lot bigger. And so now I have some in a freezer right behind me. Used to, a sirloin is something they would cut and it would be however big. I've got some sirloins in my freeze that are that big. What in the world do you do with that? And I believe, if I'm not misquoting, there's 7 different cuts that they found from that sirloin. And so those are 7 different products that they can get out of that one product that are more size appropriate for people. And they've realized that, like, hey, one of the toughest cuts of the carcass is right next to one of the most tender cuts of the carcass, and how we can separate those out and utilize those differently, use cooking methods differently. And so, yes, there's always ongoing research projects, but it always blows me away how even some of the old research continues to be really relevant and useful even today.
That's awesome. Thank you. Any other questions from the crowd? Heidi, are you ready to do the wheel spin?
Yes. I've got one that's completed. I've got looks like it has a second one. Hang on. So 2 out of 3 looks like they've completed. I know,
Okay.
you guys are hard to hide when there's only 3 of you. All right, exactly.
Hopefully we'll get some more people through YouTube that fill that out, but we'll see.
All right, here we go for the oh, hang on. Oh. All right, so Suzanne will get a choice there on what she wants.
All right, Suzanne, you're the winner. There was another question here. Are there spices or seasoning mixes we can get through the website?
There are a couple of recipes on developing seasoning. I know it's funny, we're going to be in an event here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have a seasoning station where people, if you're at the Cattle Raisers Convention and Expo, we're going to have a booth set up there. We're having a chef come in. We're going to do a cooking demo. We're going to do a cutting demo where we're cutting up an entire carcass. I'm going to be moderating a panel where of producers who market beef directly to consumers and showcase some of the different ways that they do that and different techniques and stuff that they have. One of the things we're doing there is we have a seasoning station where we're going to have some recipes that people can go in, and we'll have the raw ingredients. They can mix their own seasoning. We don't have seasoning that you can order from our website. Frankly, we partner with a lot of different seasoning companies. For instance, Suckle Busters is one that we do some partnerships around the state fair with, and so they'll put Beef Loving Texans logos on some of their seasonings that they retail at Walmart, HEB, Kroger, Brookshire Brothers, Brookshire's, you name it. And so you can find those. But no, we don't have recipes for sale, if you will. We do have a merch store. And so if you're on the Beef Loving Texans website, you can go to our merch store. We've got Yeti cups and t-shirts and cutting boards and all these different things that are available for purchase. It's not a for-profit operation, so it's just we're trying to recover costs and shipping from those. And so they're relatively economical if you need to get some last minute birthday or Christmas gifts. I encourage you to go take a look at it. But no, we don't have any seasonings for sale.
All right. Well, Caleb, thank you so much for coming out. This was awesome information, and hopefully everyone can take a little bit and put it to use to their own operations. And um, so, yeah, we'll end things here. And thanks again for coming out.
Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah. All right. If you need to take off, feel free to take off. Susan,
You
yeah,
can go ahead and
what's that?
I was going to say you can go ahead and kill the recording, and then if anybody
Oh, yeah.
has some question and answers they want to do, we can do that as a separate